Welcome back. President Trump lashed out at former House Speaker Paul Ryan in a series of tweets late last night after a new book revealed Ryan's negative views of Trump's 2016 campaign and the first 2 years of his presidency. Trump tweeted in part, Paul Ryan, the failed VP candidate and former Speaker of the House, whose record of achievement was atrocious, except during my first 2 years as president, ultimately became a long-running lame duck failure, leaving his party in the lurch both as a fundraiser and a leader. Adding, quote, he had the majority and blew it away with his poor leadership and bad timing. Couldn't get him out of Congress fast enough. The tweets were presumably sparked by the new book, American Carnage, which details Ryan's criticism of Trump. Ryan told author Tim Alberta, quote, I told myself I got to have a relationship with this guy to help him get his mind right, because I'm telling you, he didn't know anything about government. I wanted to scold him all the time. We've gotten so numbed by it, not in government, but where we live our lives. We have a responsibility to try and rebuild. Don't call a woman a horse face. Don't cheat on your wife. Don't cheat on anything. Be a good person. Set a good example. And Tim Alberta will be our guest on Morning Joe on Monday. Joining us now, Associate Editor of Commentary Magazine and an MSNBC contributor, Noah Rothman. And Joe, we have a lot to talk about with Paul Ryan. It just seems to me that this book, and I wonder what Noah and Donnie think, but this book seems a little bit too little too late. We need leaders to step up in real time. They should be able to do two things at once. They should be able to make critiques when they are, quite frankly, the obvious response to someone's actions, and they should be able to try and work together as well.
I know, Donnie, you've talked about this an awful lot. Paul Ryan was the third highest ranking leader in America. What are your thoughts about his comments?
He was the hope. He was the biggest disappointment because he was in a position, and even if short term it cost him, you've said this many times, Donald Trump history will show that people are tarnished by the toxicity of him, and anybody who would have stood up to him. And I think Ryan was the one guy that could have done it. Even if at that time it took him down, it would have set him up to be one of the great leaders of our country going forward, because he would have been the guy that said, I told you so. We were all waiting for it. He had the gravitas, he had the position, he had the credibility, he had the true conservative nature and credentials. And yes, he's saying all these things now, but to Mika's point, they should have been said in 2016. That's what brave people do. That's what leaders do.
So Noah, these quotes from Paul Ryan in Tim Alberta's book, which I have to tell you, I got an advance copy, is relentlessly good. Every page has reporting on it in the narrative that he tells of the Trump presidency. But it will make people pull their hair out, because this is what they wanted to hear from Paul Ryan while he was sitting there for 2 years. I understand he had a tricky job as Speaker, that he had to manage a caucus, a lot of which liked Donald Trump. A lot of people in his own district liked Donald Trump. But he didn't say any of these things when he had the chance to actually do something about them, and then to say them after the fact to Tim Alberta is frustrating, to say the least, to a lot of people.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, there's the imperative of governing. During this period, right, in the early first year of the Trump presidency, I recall seeing a lot of on-background quotes from Republican sources, people close to Republicans, even lawmakers, expressing their deep frustrations with the president, his lack of understanding of how government works, and also his comportment, just his personal behavior was frustrating for their agenda. And Paul Ryan is in an extremely difficult position. He inherited this caucus. He was the only person who could wrangle it. Nobody could unite it when John Boehner retired. And Donald Trump ran for the presidency against his signature policy issues. He ran on support for example, the mandate, the individual mandate to purchase health insurance. He ran against cuts to Social Security and Medicare, balancing the budget, which was Paul Ryan's signature his course and his mission in government. So when he was elected to the presidency, Paul Ryan was very deflated. He had only one option, which was to manage and guide the president and a party that he had lost control of, even though he was the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, Joe, you read Tim's book, and it's not just Paul Ryan, by the way. In the campaign during the Access Hollywood weekend, there's this incredible account of that and how disgusted Republicans were. And you take the snapshot of the way Republicans said they felt that day, and a lot of them walking away from him publicly and privately from Donald Trump, and then how they conducted himself when he became president of the United States. It's night and day.
It is night and day. And I've got to say, Paul Ryan did have a choice. He had a choice every day. He was Speaker of the House, third only behind the Vice President and the President. Article 1 gives the Speaker and the House of Representatives extraordinary powers. Paul had the power of the checkbook. And, you know, Rev, when we were just little backbenchers in Congress, we had a choice and stood up to Newt Gingrich when we thought that Newt was moving away from the things that we had campaigned on. And the powers of the Speaker are extraordinary. So I don't buy that Paul Ryan didn't have a choice. That's what Paul told everybody, that he didn't have a choice. He had a choice. He just chose to be quiet and allow Donald Trump to have his way.
No, I think you raised a critical point. The real reason that the backbenchers, as you called yourselves at that time, would challenge a speaker or others would challenge people that were in positions is you went there for a reason and you believed in something. When I hear all of this from Paul Ryan, where you will compromise on serious government policy and even on what you would deal with as appropriate personal behavior, I have to question how much you really believe in what you say you believe in if you would compromise all of that for the moment of making some transaction. If you really believe something, and this is what the evangelicals are going to face, if you really believe in something, there comes a point where you don't compromise it or you really don't believe in it. And I think that's where the choices come. And I think what happened with the backbenchers that took on Newt Gingrich, or some even on the left that take on people, is there's a real division between those of us that really believe what we say or those that say it, but we really don't believe it because when we get tested, we're not willing to go all the way.
Well, you know, you can go back to the day that Paul Ryan endorsed Donald Trump, a couple of days after calling him a racist. And Mika and I said in real time that he was handling that relationship wrong. You never give Donald Trump something for nothing. And that's exactly what Paul Ryan did. He folded, he caved at the beginning of the relationship. Donald Trump does not respect weakness. Donald Trump, a bully, politically only understands strength. Paul didn't show him that early on. And Heidi, that set up a relationship where Donald Trump would never
destined for
respect
failure.
Paul Ryan. And if you're Paul Ryan, you fight your entire life for free trade, and you're caving to a guy who's a Herbert Hoover protectionist. You fight your entire life to stand up to Russia, and you're caving to a guy who kowtows to an ex-KGB agent who is running an autocracy in Turkey, in Russia. You have the same thing in Turkey with Erdogan, where at times Donald Trump caves to him. He caves to autocrats in North Korea, caves to autocrats in the Philippines. I mean, we could talk about entitlement reform. Paul and I always talked about the importance of entitlement reform to save Social Security and save Medicare. Donald Trump said from the very beginning, I'm not touching either of those things. So how exactly did Paul Ryan justify everything that he overlooked?
You know, I remember so many points, Joe, during his tenure, reaching out to people close to Paul Ryan and asking, you know, what is he thinking? Is he going to say something? And every time the answer was always the same, that while Paul Ryan had strong personal feelings, for instance, about the comments around Charlottesville, that he was, quote unquote, a Boy Scout, and that he had this code, which I guess was essentially a code of silence, because we never did hear him come out forcefully while he was there. But to me, as someone who's kind of followed Paul Ryan's career in the House and followed the things that he's found most important in his career, the most poignant epitaph is probably his position on the deficit, because even though his party is also a party that very much supports tax cuts, the championing of this latest round of tax cuts and having that kind of be the note on which he went out as Speaker and out of Congress is really poignant, because what because of what it did do to the deficit, and because all of the things that Paul Ryan stood for with his budget. He was kind of the person who championed this budget that would save Social Security for the long haul. All of those things were washed out the window with those tax cuts.
Well, and Amna, you wonder what other Republicans right now still serving in office are thinking as they continue to suck up to this president and give him something for nothing and agree with even the most egregious things that might come out of his mouth or that he might have done during his presidency, during his campaign. They know this ends badly. And yet they don't stand up to him even on the most basic things. I haven't heard anybody speaking out even about the labor secretary on the Republican side.
You know, one of the things that's been very true and very clear in this presidency is that the silence of many people does speak volumes. You know, looking back at what Paul Ryan's sort of evolution on Donald Trump first as a candidate and then as president, Paul Ryan was sort of presenting himself as a pragmatist, right? That this may be not someone who I personally agree with. I may vehemently disagree with a lot of things that he says, but I can work with this president to get things done. And we saw that in his work up to those historic tax cuts that they were able to push through. Not necessarily on health care, which of course was important to both of them, important to Paul Ryan as well, but certainly on the tax cuts. But remember, Paul Ryan went from not saying very much publicly to tepidly supporting the president. And we saw that with a lot of people. We have seen that over the last 2.5, 3 years. I can't say that he's unique in any way. What's unique is that because he's now free to speak his mind, he is out there giving interviews and showing what he really believed to be true at the time. You can't imagine that we won't see it with other people as well when they do feel they're free to be able to say what they really feel.
Well, Mika, you
Aren't
see
they
the
free?
before and afters. I mean, they're free to
They're
speak
free right now.
They just choose not to.
They're
because-
free. You have a voice, and this is America.
No, but you know, Mika, you look at the before and the afters. The quotes about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Whether it's Mick Mulvaney or whether
My
it's
Lord.
Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey saying that Donald Trump would destroy the Republican Party and the Republican Party would deserve to be destroyed if he got in power. Now Lindsey is a sycophant of the First
Oh, my
Order to
gosh.
Donald Trump. Look at what the current minority leader in the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, said. Kevin McCarthy
Oh, my gosh, the worst.
said, caught on tape, that Donald Trump, he believed, had taken payoffs from Vladimir Putin.
Yep.
And now Kevin McCarthy is sucking up to Donald Trump every day. And you could go down the list, every single one of them talking about how horrible Donald Trump was. And the second he got into power, suddenly, he's their best friend. I don't
Pitiful.
know what's worth that, to be honest.
National
with you.
correspondent for PBS NewsHour, Amna Nawaz. Thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.